You know, there's something profoundly isolating that certain people experience from their earliest memory. A feeling so persistent and pervasive that it becomes the background reality of their entire existence. The feeling of being fundamentally different from everyone around. Not different in the superficial ways that people celebrate, not different in the way that makes you special or chosen or superior, but different in a way that feels like you're living in a parallel universe where you can see others and they can see you, but somehow you're never quite inhabiting the same reality. You watch people connect effortlessly over things you find trivial. You see them excited about pursuits that seem hollow to you. You observe them operating within systems and structures that feel completely arbitrary and meaningless. And you wonder constantly, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just be like everyone else? Why do I feel like an alien observing human life rather than actually living it? If this describes your experience, if you've spent your life feeling like you don't quite belong anywhere, please give this video a thumbs up and share your story in the comments below. You might be surprised how many others have lived with this same invisible isolation. And if you want to understand what's really happening beneath this feeling, subscribe to this channel. Now, before we go any further, I need to address the immediate concern that arises when anyone talks about feeling different. The worry that this is just ego, just specialness syndrome, just another way of feeling superior to others while pretending to suffer from it. And yes, the ego can absolutely co-opt genuine difference and turn it into identity, into a story about being special or chosen or more evolved than the masses. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is something you didn't choose, something that's been with you since before you had language for it, something that's caused you more pain and confusion than any sense of specialness could possibly compensate for. This is not about being better. This is about being different in ways that make connection extraordinarily difficult and belonging feel perpetually out of reach. The first truth about why you feel different from everyone is that you actually are different. And that difference is not imaginary or pathological or something you need to fix. There is genuine neurological and psychological diversity in the human population, and some people are wired in ways that put them at the edges of the bell curve, that make them experience reality differently than the majority. This is not a disorder, though it's often pathologized as one. This is variation, the same kind of variation that exists in every complex system. Some people's brains are configured to perceive pattern, others don't notice, to feel emotional textures, others barely register, to question assumptions others accept without thought, to require meaning and authenticity in ways others simply don't. And when you're wired this way, when your fundamental operating system is different from the majority, you will inevitably feel different because you are different. Think about what happens when you perceive things others don't perceive. You walk into a room and immediately sense the tension between two people who are smiling and acting normal. You listen to someone speak and hear not just their word, but the fear beneath their confidence, the neediness beneath their generosity, the performance beneath their authenticity. You look at social structures and see not necessary institution, but arbitrary construction that could be completely different. You encounter beliefs that everyone accepts and immediately see the contradiction, the unexamined assumption, the cultural conditioning pretending to be true. This is not something you're trying to do. This is how your mind naturally works. You cannot not see these things once you're looking. And when you see what others don't see, when you perceive dimensions of reality that others are blind to, of course, you feel different. You are operating with a different set of perceptual instruments, receiving different data, processing reality through different frameworks. I remember someone describing their experience of being in a relationship where they could feel their partner's emotion more clearly than their partner could feel. They would notice subtle shifts in energy, small changes in tone, barely perceptible withdrawal, and they would respond to what they were sensing. But their partner would have no awareness that anything had shifted, would insist everything was fine, would accuse them of being oversensitive or reading things that weren't there. And yet, days later, the partner would have a breakdown and admit to exactly what had been sensed earlier. This happened repeatedly. The person wasn't imagining things or projecting. They were simply perceiving emotional reality that their partner couldn't yet access consciously. And living with this kind of perception, constantly sensing things others can't sense, and being told you're imagining it, creates profound doubt about your own sanity and profound isolation from others who seem to be living in a simpler, more straightforward reality. The second truth about why you feel different is that the society you were born into was not designed for your type of nervous system, your type of mind, your type of need. Modern society is optimized for a very specific kind of person. Someone who can tolerate high levels of stimulation without overwhelm. Someone who can function well in hierarchical structures without questioning their legitimacy. Someone who finds satisfaction in conventional markers of success. Someone who can maintain superficial relationship without feeling the empty. Someone who can ignore existential questions and focus on practical concerns. Someone who can believe in the narratives society tells about itself without constantly noticing the contradiction. If you're this kind of person, and many people are, society works reasonably well for you. You fit, you belong, you can navigate social structures and expectations without constant friction. But if you're not this kind of person, if your nervous system needs more quiet and stillness, if your mind constantly questions authority and conventional wisdom, if you require depth and authenticity in relationship rather than breadth and performance, if existential questions feel more urgent than practical success, if you can't stop noticing the contradiction between what society claims to be and what it actually is, then you will feel like you're trying to live in a house built for someone with completely different dimension. Nothing quite fit. Everything requires uncomfortable adjustment, and you're constantly being told that the problem is you, that you need to adjust better, try harder, be more flexible, fix whatever is wrong with you that makes you unable to fit into structures that work perfectly well for everyone else. But here's what nobody tells you. The structures don't work perfectly well for everyone else either. They work adequately for some people, and those people have learned to numb themselves to the part that don't work, to adjust their expectations, to settle for what's available. But there are countless others who feel just as alienated and different as you do. They just haven't recognized it yet, or they're working desperately to pretend they fit because the alternative, admitting you don't fit, feels too terrifying and isolating. You're not failing to adapt to a healthy environment. You're refusing to adapt to an environment that doesn't actually serve human well-being. At least not for all humans. At least not for humans with your particular configuration. And your feeling of different, your sense of not belonging, is not pathology. It's accurate perception of a genuine mismatch between who you are and what you've been given to work with. The third truth about why you feel different is that you're experiencing reality at a different depth than most people operate at, and this creates an unbridgeable gap in shared experience. Most people live primarily on the surface of life. They're concerned with practical matters, social dynamic, immediate pleasures and pain, maintaining their position, protecting their ego, pursuing their desire. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is normal human consciousness, functional consciousness that allows people to navigate daily life without being paralyzed by deeper question or overwhelmed by larger reality. But some people, whether through natural disposition or through experiences that cracked open their awareness, cannot stay on the surface. They fall through, or they're pulled through, into deeper water. They become aware of existential realities that most people successfully ignore. The certainty of death and the uncertainty of what, if anything, continues beyond it. The ultimate meaninglessness of all constructed meaning. The impossibility of truly knowing another person or being truly known. The arbitrariness of all social structures and value. The performance and pretense that underlies most human interaction. The suffering inherent in existence itself. These are not abstract philosophical questions when you're experiencing them. These are lived realities that color everything, that make it impossible to take ordinary life quite seriously anymore, that create a kind of existential vertigo where nothing feels solid and everything feels questionable. And when you're living at this depth, when these realities are part of your daily awareness, you cannot connect with people who are living on the surface. You speak different languages, you care about different things. What they find urgent, you find trivial. What they take for granted, you find bizarre. What they never question, you cannot stop questioning. And so conversations feel hollow, relationships feel incomplete. You can interact with people, you can be kind to them, you can participate in surface reality, but there's always a part of you that's elsewhere, that's aware of dimensions they're not accessing, that's living in a different universe even while occupying the same physical space. I knew someone who described going to party and feeling like an anthropologist observing an alien culture. Everyone around them was genuinely enjoying themselves, laughing at jokes, gossiping about mutual acquaintances, discussing their job and relationship and plan. And they could participate to a degree, could smile and nod and make appropriate comment. But internally they were watching the whole scene with this strange detachment, seeing it as a collective agreement to pretend that these interactions mattered, that these concerns were important, that this was real connection rather than just social ritual, not with judgment or superiority, but with a kind of bewildered fascination. How can they do this so unself-consciously? How can they believe so completely in the reality of? How can they not see that we're all just playing role, following script, maintaining a shared fiction? And this awareness made genuine connection impossible, because connection requires being in the same reality, and they were fundamentally in a different one. The fourth truth about why you feel different is that you're carrying capacities or awareness that humanity is still collectively developing, and pioneers are always isolated. Evolution doesn't happen uniformly. Consciousness doesn't expand evenly across the entire population. There are always outliers, people who develop capacity or awareness ahead of the collective, who embody potential futures before most people can even imagine them. And if you're one of these people, if you're carrying consciousness or capacities that the collective hasn't yet developed, you will inevitably feel profoundly different and alone, because you are different and alone in a very real sense. You're operating at a level of awareness or complexity or sensitivity that most people around you haven't reached and may not reach in their lifetime. This is not about being evolutionarily superior. This is about timing. You happened to develop certain capacities earlier, whether through genetics or experience or some combination. And pioneers, by definition, are isolated. They're ahead of the pack, moving through territory the pack hasn't entered yet. There's no path to follow, no community walking alongside, no shared language for what they're experiencing. Everything has to be figured out alone, navigated without guidance, understood without the benefit of collective wisdom, because the collective hasn't been there yet. And this is extraordinarily difficult, because humans are social creatures who rely on mirroring, on shared experience, on communal knowledge. When you're pioneering, you don't have access to any of that. You're in unmapped territory, completely alone. Think about what this means practically. You're developing capacities for authenticity in a world that mostly operates through performance. You're developing sensitivity to energy and emotional feel in a world that barely acknowledges these exist. You're developing the ability to see through social conditioning in a world that's completely identified with its condition. You're developing awareness of consciousness itself in a world that thinks consciousness is just brain activity. You're developing comfort with paradox and uncertainty in a world that demands certainty and clear answers. And there's no one to talk to about any of this. No one who understands what you're experiencing. No one who can validate that what you're perceiving is real. No one who can guide you through the challenges these developments create. You're alone, fumbling in the dark, trying to make sense of capacities and awareness that you have no framework for understanding. The fifth truth about why you feel different is that you're refusing to numb yourself the way most people have learned to, and numbness is actually the price of fitting in. Most people feel the things you feel scent the things you sense, perceive the contradiction and emptiness and performance that make up so much of social reality. But they've learned, usually unconsciously, to numb themselves to these perceptions because the perceptions are too uncomfortable, too threatening to the life they're trying to live. They numb through alcohol, through constant busyness, through entertainment and distraction, through cynicism that pretends to see clearly while actually protecting them from feeling what they see, through spiritual bypassing that jumps to transcendent without acknowledging what needs to be transcended, through 1,000 subtle mechanisms that turn down the volume on reality so it becomes tolerable. And this numbness allows them to fit in, to function, to participate in collective life without constant friction. They can go to the job that feels meaningless because they're numb to the meaninglessness. They can maintain superficial friendship because they're numbed to the lack of depth. They can accept social narrative because they're numbed to the contradiction. They can live with the performance because they're numbed to their own authenticity. But you, for whatever reason, can't or won't numb yourself. Maybe you tried and it didn't work. Maybe some experience stripped away your capacity for numbness. Maybe you're just constitutionally unable to turn down the volume on reality. Whatever the reason, you're feeling everything at full intensity, perceiving everything with clarity, aware of dimensions that others have successfully edited out of their experience. And this makes fitting in nearly impossible, because fitting in requires a degree of numbness you're unwilling or unable to achieve. This doesn't make you better than others. It makes you more uncomfortable than others. It makes your life harder in many ways. But it also means you're in contact with reality in ways they're not. You're available for depths of experience they've closed off. You're preserving capacities for authenticity and perception that get sacrificed when people numb themselves enough to fit into conventional life. And somewhere in you, despite the isolation and difficulty, you've decided that staying awake, staying sensitive, staying in full contact with reality is more important than the comfort of belonging. This is not a decision you necessarily made consciously, but it's a decision your being has made. And it's the decision that keeps you feeling different because you are living perceiving differently, refusing the compromises that would allow you to finally, blissfully fit in. The sixth truth about why you feel different is that you're living between worlds, and people who live between worlds never fully belong to either one. You're not fully embedded in conventional reality anymore, not completely identified with the social self, not entirely convinced by collective narrative, but you're also not fully realized in the deeper reality you're aware of, not consistently established in awakened consciousness, not completely free from the conditioning you can see through. You're between sleep and awakening, between unconscious participation and conscious transcend, between belonging to the collective and standing outside it, and this between space is extraordinarily lonely because you don't belong anywhere. You can't go back to unconscious participation, even though part of you sometimes wishes you could. The veil has been pulled aside, and you can't unsee what you've seen. But you also can't fully move forward into awakened consciousness, because that's a gradual development, not a sudden achievement. And you're still in process, still developing, still carrying all the human limitations and conditioning, even as you become increasingly aware of them. So you're stuck between too aware to fit in, but not aware enough to be free, too sensitive to tolerate conventional life, but not transcendent enough to be unaffected by it, seeing through the game, but still having to play it, knowing the truth, but still living the dream. And people who live in this between space are always misunderstood. The sleeping people think you're strange, or difficult, or too intense. The awakened people, if you meet any, see that you're still caught in your own patterns and limitation. You don't fit with either group. You're too much for some people and not enough for others. You're homeless in a fundamental sense, belonging nowhere, accepted fully by no one, understood by almost no one, navigating a territory that has no map and no guideposts. So what do you do with all of this? How do you live with being fundamentally different in ways that can't be changed or fixed? First, you have to stop trying to fix it. Stop trying to become normal. Stop believing that something is wrong with you that needs correcting. Your difference is not pathology. pathology, it's configuration. And trying to force yourself to be like everyone else is not healing, it's self-violation. You are who you are. You perceive what you perceive. You need what you need. And accepting this, truly accepting it, rather than fighting it or being ashamed of it, is the beginning of peace with your difference. Second, you have to find the few others who are like you, because they exist even though they're rare. You cannot survive long-term without any resonance, without anyone who understands your experience, without community of some kind, with people who speak your language. These people are scattered. They're often isolated themselves. They're not easy to find, but they're out there. And finding even one or two people who truly get it, who mirror back to you that your experience is real and valid, who can meet you in the depths rather than just on the surface. This can make the difference between crushing isolation and bearable solitude. Third, you have to build a life that honors your actual needs rather than trying to fit into structures designed for different people. This might mean unconventional choices. It might mean less financial success or social status. It might mean disappointing people who want you to be normal. But trying to force yourself into conventional structures that don't fit your configuration will slowly kill something essential in you. Better to live authentically on the margins than to die internally while appearing to succeed. Fourth, you have to find meaning in your difference rather than just suffering from it. You're carrying perception, sensitivity, awareness that's valuable even though it's uncomfortable. You're seeing things that need to be seen, feeling things that need to be felt, questioning things that need to be questioned. Your difference is not just personal burden, it's also potential gift. Not to everyone, but to those who are ready for what you can see and articulate. And finding ways to express your unique perception, to offer your gifts, even if only to a few people. This transforms your difference from curse to calling. And finally, you have to develop compassion for yourself, for how difficult it is to be you, for how much courage it takes to stay awake and sensitive in a world that rewards numbness and conformity, for how isolated and misunderstood you've been, for how hard you've tried to fit in when fitting in was never really possible. You deserve compassion, not judgment, for your difference. You deserve understanding, not criticism, for your struggle. You deserve respect, not contempt, for refusing to numb yourself into normalcy. You feel different from everyone because you are different from most people. Not better, not worse, but genuinely different in configuration and perception and need. And this difference will likely be with you for your entire life. It won't go away, it won't be fixed, it won't suddenly stop mattering. But what can change is your relationship to it, your acceptance of it, your ability to build a life that works with your difference rather than against it, your capacity to find the few others who share your frequency and build connection with them, your willingness to transform your burden into gift. You will probably never feel normal, but you can feel authentic. You will probably never fully belong to the collective, but you can belong to yourself. You will probably never be understood by the majority, but you can be understood by the few who matter. And that, strange as it sounds, can be enough.